your religion, but one day I heard you pray for a world where everyone can work and children they can play. Though you never got your share of the fruits that you have won, sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. Sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. Well, they tortured you in Belfast and they tortured you in Spain, and in that Warsaw ghetto where they tied you up in Vietnam and Fallujah where they came with tanks and guns. Say you sowed the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. Say you sowed the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons. Well, now your music's playing and the writings on the walls. The dreams that you have painted can be seen by one and all. But now you've got them thinking and the victory has just begun. Sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. Sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. Sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons, in your daughters and your sons. Sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons.
Now we're going to hear from Josie Evans, the most beautiful Josie Evans from Stop CSD Sydney.
Hi everybody. Can you hear me? What a beautiful day to say goodbye to AGL.
Yeah, goodbye.
I'm going to talk about the economy. Australia's economy. You may think that mining has a lot of negative effects, but at least it's good for the economy. Actually, it's not for so many reasons. Research by the Australia Institute lists all of these reasons, which I'm going to tell you. Let's start with jobs. Did you know that mining jobs make up only 2% of all of Australia's jobs? And CSG mining represents less than 0.5%. So the argument that mining brings jobs is crap. Tourism and education jobs also decrease. Who wants to come here from overseas if our country is one big ugly quarry? A good example is the Hunter Valley, more aptly described as coal country than wine country. The mining industry has pushed up the Australian dollar. Any industry which relies on overseas markets, like manufacturing and farming, suffer as a result, and consequently workers get laid off and farmers walk off their properties. So this is another reason that mining has a bad effect on the economy. It brings up the dollar. What about profits? You may think that at least Australia gets the profits from mining. This is another lie. The mining industry in Australia is 83% foreign owned. So profits go straight to shareholders overseas. Well, what about the taxes that the mining companies pay? Well, actually, corporate industries are supposed to pay 21% in tax, but mining industries, they only pay 13%. So Australia doesn't even get the taxes from mining. Okay, finally, there are the subsidies that the government gives to the mining industry. Every year, mining industry receives $10 billion from our government. We give them $10 billion. The major subsidies include extraordinarily generous research and development tax concessions, accelerated depreciation of mines and equipment, fuel tax concessions, and this is the best one, enormous infrastructure projects funded by state governments. Our state governments fund the building of mines for the mining industry. Wouldn't that $10 billion be better spent on housing, transport, health or education, or even renewable infrastructures? Yeah. It does not seem to me like mining is good for our economy at all. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the gas shortage. The so-called gas shortage. The government, gas industry and some sections of the media try to tell us that New South Wales is running out of gas. This is a lie. New South Wales obtains 94% of its gas from interstate at the moment from conventional offshore gas operations. Only 6% of New South Wales gas comes from the Camden wells, which produce CSG. It is ridiculous to say New South Wales is running out of gas when it never had much to begin with. Industry chiefs have stated that there is enough Australian offshore gas to supply the whole of the country for the next 150 years. So why are they digging up more of it? The real reason for the frantic push for gas is so that CSG companies can make huge profits selling gas overseas. In the event that Australia links to the international gas market in 2015, domestic gas prices will triple. Why would companies sell to Aussies at a cheaper price than they can get in Asia? This coal seam gas rush has nothing to do with our security and everything to do with their profits. But we have shown that we can make a difference to government policy and industry behaviour. This gas rush can only happen if we let it. Okay. If people want to find out more about the economics, there's a great book by the Australia Institute. I urge everyone to read it. The Australia Institute. Thank you.
Gloucester wells will look probably not just like this, but likely a lot worse. And so I want to use that as my little introduction. So this is unconventional gas mining. This is the industry in real terms. It's not just a single solitary well head like a gas company will have you believe. They often say to people when they're getting them to sign the land access agreements that it's just one well or a few wells and it's not going to cause you much hassle at all. This is simply not true, and this is what it ends up looking like, and it not only impacts on your own property but your neighbouring property and your whole community. So a gas field cannot operate and produce sufficient gas without hundreds of wells operating together in a network. From the picture, you can imagine the on-ground impact. There's heavy traffic, toxic spills, 1 in 5, horrendous 24/7 noise, huge compressor stations, monstrous water processing plants, eradication of bushland, severe community health impacts, community being forced off their land, property prices plummeting, destruction of local tourism and regional manufacturing industries, no farming once the water table is compromised, which disables irrigation of crops and watering livestock. Basically, farmland, community land, and our natural landscapes are ripped up for kilometres of gas pipelines. electrical overhead wiring and invasive gridding up of our communities, wastewater mayhem as disposal of produced and wastewater takes up swimming pool-sized spaces in once usable arable land. Our forest habitat for native flora and fauna is destroyed, and all the corridors in which keep them going in areas where there's not much bushland left, or remnants of bushland. The toxic wastewater also used for some other inappropriate means. They're either dumped or used irresponsibly at the community's risk as irrigation or some other form of production. So basically, we're looking at an industry that has so many toxic kills and toxic spills, and this is just not what we see on the surface. However, this is the case, and this is what's emerging both in Queensland and in the US and across the world, in fact. So with the toxic spills, there's loss of habitat for wildlife, loss of carbon sinks with removal of integral green spaces of bushland communities, coupled with a posing of a massive bushfire risk, with the industry flaring its gas in the bush, whilst bushfire hazards are exempt from total fire bans. So these companies are in fact exempt from total fire bans. This recently happened with Santos in the Pilliga, and this poses for us in a country that we live in, which, you know, everyone knows about bushfires, and I live in a country where we suffer from bushfires all of the time, and it affects our community greatly. So I, for one, know the seriousness of the impacts of such an environmental hazard. So yeah, they get exempt from fire bans, and the methane of the wells also leaks into the atmosphere, expelling dangerously high levels of emissions that our atmosphere can no longer afford. This is an industrial takeover of our landscapes, of our livelihoods, of our food bowls, our conservation landscapes, our urban and rural communities, and our lives. This is an invasion. It's not just simply a mining, company coming in and doing a few gas wells here and there. It's an actual invasion of our landscape. It's happening across the state. It's happening everywhere. It's not just an isolated incident. We have managed so far with pure hard work to keep much of the industry from spreading in New South Wales through a variety of tactics. And many of the people here today who have travelled far and wide have been a part of that. But it is still not banned yet. We still have coal seam gas, and the government is still enabling the industry despite alarming evidence emerging in Queensland and the US. This is up to all of us to prevent this industry, which is largely offshore investors for an export market, just as Josie outlined, and it's tearing our local lives apart. So we have offshore interests tearing our local lives apart. We've got to stop this, because we're the ones now that are going to be responsible, because our government simply won't make the appropriate moves to ensure that our safety is met. Nowhere is sacred, and basically I've got a figure here that comes from the Nature Conservation Council, and there are applications for licences to develop coal seam gas in 80% of the state of New South Wales alone, and 25% are already approved, so that's 80%. So looking back at this picture again, imagine this over 80% of New South Wales with the infrastructure that I described before. That's how serious this is. This is not just in Gloucester, it's not just in Camden, it's everywhere. And the fact that AGL are contributors to this industry with their projects in Gloucester and with their projects in Camden, we have to stop them as well. The New South Wales Government Department of Energy and Resources is now under an ICAC inquiry, and what has been going on with this industry in our government is highly illegal, in my opinion. An abolition to protect our rights, our natural environment and our human health. This ICAC inquiry is a legitimate investigation into the activities of government with corporations and the influence of decision making being a result of the collusion of these two factions. I have no doubt that this has been going on, whether they find evidence of this or not. I believe this has been happening. They may or may not find evidence, we don't know, but the fact is they are under investigation because there is enough information there to say that it could possibly have been going on. So that brings us to AGL, their activities, pursuant to the communities of Gloucester and Camden, and why we are here today. And so I was actually going to talk to you mainly about Camden, and I'll just quickly go over some of the main issues that that we've had with AGL in Camden. And basically, they've done several things. They've currently got an existing gas field, which some of you may not be aware of. There's already 80 wells in Camden itself, and they've been actually producing coal seam gas for 10 years. And you know, that was happening and began at a time where there wasn't much knowledge and understanding of the risks of coal seam gas. So they've managed to keep that gas field continuing for some time. But anyway, for the last 4 years of that 10 years, they have not been recording emissions. They were actually fined for this. And I mean, who's to know if they had been recording emissions at that time? They could have been asked to stop practice, you know, years ago by the EPA. This is not acceptable. This is an industry, this is a company that claims to be above board, professional, and doing the right thing by the community, and that is not what is happening at all. They also had a recent situation at the beginning of this year where a wastewater well was flooded with a flood that was happening at the time in the area, and the whole wastewater pond was completely immersed in water, and it ran into the Nepean River, and the Nepean River started bubbling as a result of that. They denied that it was any cause of methane or any poisons or leaching of toxins went into the river. However, a lot of people concerned about this issue believe otherwise, but they weren't allowed access to the area. So basically, this is a company that is claiming to be able to progress with these wells because they work in conjunction with the community. We believe that they don't work in conjunction with the community, that they do not coexist with the community, that what has been happening in Gloucester is they simply go in and they force themselves on the land, on the community, they take over people's properties, and then they just continue to do whatever they wish despite 82% of the community saying we don't want this industry. So basically, I just want to finish this up now and say thank you for everyone coming here today and supporting this action. And yeah, we say no to AGL and no to coal seam gas.
No wells, 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 AGL. I met her at the reception. Glass of wine in her hand. She was practiced in the art of gas deception. At her feet was the AGL man. And you can't always get what you want. No, you can't always get what you want. No, you can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, you just might find clean energy's what you need. Woo! That's the power of the sun, folks. The sun can burst a balloon. and it can power a city. Just like this model we got over here. With an array of mirrors and molten salt. It can go for 24 hours and never stop. And you can always get what you want. No, you can't always get what you want. No, you can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, you just might find solar power is what we need. nothing's really been planned. Back that up. But you try sometime. Solar power is what you need. Sing songs. Thank you, and we're sorry we got to pack up the PA now.